Live Native Eastern Canada meetup here at Q4. Like I said, we're close to the Shopify, but yeah, so how do I do this? Good enough. Okay. The Kubernetes Canada organization organizes meetups all over Quebec and Southern Ontario. I mean, not all over, obviously, but Ottawa, Kitchener, Waterloo, Montreal, Quebec City, and Toronto. I believe we're the last city in this range of, or in this particular tour, but there were other meetups in these other cities, and some of those talks were presented online, so you should go check that out. I have another thing for you. Oh no, I don't. That'll come up in a bit. As always, we have thanks to our sponsors. I'll just read through them. CloudOps, Red Hat, Microsoft, Rancher, Elastic, and Tigera. And then below this line, I don't know what the delineation is, but it seems really significant, is Container Solutions, Shopify, CDS, SNC, Square, Ticketmaster, and Ecobee. We also have new sponsors for Q4, which is IBM, StackRox, JFrog, and D2IQ. So thank you to those people. And it makes more sense when I'm not the one presenting this, but thank you to Shopify for hosting us tonight. Yeah, so this is the slide that was kind of thrown in at the last minute by Archie, congratulating Shopify on doing $2.9 billion in Black Friday, Cyber Monday 2019 sales, all running on Kubernetes, or at least vast majority. Congratulations. All right, so all of this gets organized through a Slack channel, the Kubernetes Canada Slack.roadmap.com, or the QR code. People are encouraged to join this if they are interested in kind of keeping up with these kind of events. There's also a community there. It's not uncommon for people to ask questions about some technology that they're trying to use, or advice on a particular choice between a number of similar options, and the people there have opinions. It ends up being a bit of a smaller group than the Kubernetes main Slack channel, so it's easier to be heard. And like I said, also organizing events like this one. These meetups don't run on magic, so the next quarter meetups are already have the paper call open for people who'd like to present at the Q1 meetups, either in Ottawa, Montreal, Quebec, Toronto, or Waterloo. I encourage people to do that if they have something Kubernetes that they feel like they can present, because obviously, like, if no one wants to present, then there's no meetup. So. And similarly, if you don't want to present, but you have a company that you could help by sponsoring or providing a venue, volunteers who are interested in just keeping the organization and the meetups going, co-organizers, or if you want to talk, all of these things are very helpful to the organization. So please, again, join the Slack that I mentioned earlier and help out. And if at any point, if like I've gone through the slides and none of you, and I've skipped through like the Kubernetes or some of the other QR codes that are coming up, just talk to me after and I can get the URLs for you. Okay, these are the Waterloo meetup organizers. This one over here that's just an icon, and Archie unfortunately couldn't make it today. Normally it was going to be him for giving his presentation, but...
Is that you?
Yes, I don't look exactly like it. So Archie is the organizer of a number of the other cities' events, and like I said, the producer of this slide deck. So thank you to Archie anyway. There were also two other people from two of the other cities that helped to put together this slide deck, so thank you to them as well. I'm currently delivering their work, I imagine more poorly than they would have. So here's the agenda for tonight. So there's going to be a little bit, the names are wrong, whatever. There's going to be a little bit of a recap on the Kubernetes Kubecon, a little bit of an update on the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, which is CNCF, basically the different projects that make up the consortium. A little bit of a talk on the year that Istio has had, in a good way. And then a little bit of a talk on where Kubernetes has gone and where it's going. Then we're going to move into our first real presenter of the night, which is Olga, here from Pivotal, and doing this talk Modern DevOps with Spinnaker and the state of the Kubernetes provider. And then our second talk of the night by Andy from Shopify, Auto-Scaling in Reality, Lessons Learned from the Adaptively Scaling Kubernetes. I think I threw an extra Z in there. All right, okay. So, Kubecon recap. Again, these notes are not my own, but I'm going to present them as though they are. So, Kubecon this year was in San Diego, the Kubecon America, I should say. There were 11,981 attendees. 65% were going to Kubecon for the first time. There was 153 media analysts, 33 co-located events, which I'll talk about in a bit, actually. 2,631 companies. And then there's a breakdown here, 83% male participants, 11% women, and 0.4% non-binary and other genders. So that's the quick stats on Kubecon in San Diego. We also have kind of like the top 10 announcements as per Archie's opinions. So the first one is obviously that a company called Mirantis has acquired Docker Enterprise Business, or Docker's Enterprise Business. The rough gist of this is that the Docker open source stuff is going to continue, but all of their like enterprise offerings have been acquired by this company. So in a sense, they're kind of leaving that space, which is interesting. I mean, there's a number of other providers, so I suppose that's part of this. Helm 3 has actually been released. People have been talking about Helm 3 for a while now, and this time it's actually a real thing that has been released. It is official, so people are excited about that. JFrog, which is a company you may know, has announced that their container registry and their Helm registry has been released for free, or is offered for free. Basically, a number of hosting providers have kind of been run out by the Google and Amazon hosting, and the fact that it's essentially a free part of their offerings, and so they're having to adapt their business models because there isn't as much money in hosting Docker images. Rancher has announced that K3S, I've heard some people say keys, I don't know, general availability. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But it's essentially a low resource requirement Kubernetes for semi-embedded stuff. And also Rancher has put Rio in beta. Rio is service mesh, if I'm not mistaken. The Sysdig, which has Falco, which is a security management system, has announced the Cloud Native Security Hub, or released the Cloud Native Security Hub, which again is looking to improve security and security monitoring on Kubernetes clusters. PlanetScale has launched the CNDB fully managed Vitess. So for companies that want Vitess, which is a semi-scalable MySQL adapter, but don't want to run it, the company behind it has launched a fully managed version. Istio 1.4 was released. More on Istio coming up. It's a service mesh. IBM's Kubernetes service has announced a managed Istio, or their managed Istio is now general availability. So again, if you were interested in Istio but didn't want to put the effort into running it, IBM has your back, I guess. And Solo.io has introduced Autopilot, which is a set of operators for running service meshes in your cluster. So that is also an option for running Istio or any of the other service meshes that there are. Well, not any, the ones that they support. And finally, Google Cloud Run, which is Google's Knative, or that it runs on Google on the Knative APIs, has reached general availability as well. So the Google Cloud Run team feels like you should feel comfortable running your serverless things on their platform. Knative, by the way, API for running like serviceless functions as a service stuff. Okay. Next slide. Oh, these are some people who normally would have been standing up here at Kubecon. So these are the trends from Kubecon 2019. So the first one is that the disparity between ingress controllers and services is starting to attract attention. There hasn't been a lot of work on ingress controllers and services since the beginnings of Kubernetes, kind of. So Tim Hockin was at Kubecon. One of the big names behind Kubernetes was at Kubecon, talking about building an abstraction that could work for like level 4 of the network stack services, as well as level 7 ingress controllers, and looking to try and unify those two things together. There's also something I'm going to talk about a little bit later that's also kind of related to that. But yeah, having some sort of gateway API or something that would kind of tie these things together that are currently a little bit strangely separate. As well as perhaps paving the way into making service meshes a little bit more built into Kubernetes, and having services or ingress controllers be kind of a native part of a service mesh or something like that as well, like another one of the abstraction layers. The next one is architecture pluggability. So this is different container runtimes. So Docker being one of them, but there's also like Rocket and Cryo, Containerd, and all these other things that are alternatives to Docker. So really kind of pulling out those things is a big focus of the year, and trying to make it so that you can, with this runtime class feature of Kubernetes, make it so that you can have different runtimes within the same cluster, and you can say that these workloads should probably run on Rocket, whereas these ones can run on Docker, those kinds of things. And then NSM, I believe, is native service mesh, which is, again, trying to make the service mesh, network service mesh, sorry. Trying to make so that the ability to plug a service mesh into the Kubernetes is a little bit more first class and allows you to have more control over that kind of thing. The next one is operators. Everyone at KubeCon was talking about operators, which are things that receive events about Kubernetes and perform some operation and push some custom resource changes back in and allow you to build custom automation or import other people's custom automation into your Kubernetes clusters. So people were talking all about those. Many different frameworks were all brought up. Kube Builder is one. The operator framework from Red Hat. Ansible operator, Pluto. There's a number of these that are all kind of competing in the space and trying to win you and make it easy to write operators, basically. There was a bunch of talks about Kubernetes everywhere and not just in like large cloud environments. So things like the K3S that I was talking about earlier from Rancher, which is trying to use the same, it's a Kubernetes compatible API, but it has substantially fewer runtime resource requirements so that you can run it like on a network edge or on smaller hardware or something like that. There was talks about telecoms using Kubernetes for their 5G deployments. There's a tool called Metal 3, which deploys, which bootstraps Kubernetes onto bare metal machines, that kind of thing. So just kind of spreading Kubernetes out of just a managed cloud environment and also into all sorts of other environments.
Can you run on a Raspberry Pi?
I believe K3S can run on a Raspberry Pi. I was planning on trying it and didn't get around to it, maybe over the Christmas holiday, but I believe so. Right. Next slide. Yeah.
Can you also do like an analysis which one of them are open source, which one of them are not open source?
K3S, I believe, is open source. That's a Rancher project. I assume Metal 3 is, but I do not know. You'd have to look that up. One of the other things is there was, again, many talks about policies. This is something that Kubernetes needs more of as it goes further into its life. Previously in the past, anyone could kind of push to anything, but as it's gotten more and more deployed by larger and larger companies, that's not as acceptable. So many people have been talking about role-based access controls and open policy specifications and applying those policies outside of just Kubernetes into like Istio for managing the network and which service can touch to which and those kinds of things. So just like there were many talks on managing policies and writing policies and automating policies. Then The other one is Open Telemetry. So there was previously an API called Open Census by Google that was about tying together metrics and logs, I think, at the same time. There was another one called Open Tracing. Those have merged into a library called Open Telemetry, which is trying to make it so that you can have tracing across your whole distributed apps cluster without having to go in and put in manual tracing points all throughout your code, and then like standardizing the whole thing so you can have different tools that respond to different things. So many people were excited about that, but then there also talks about like, is it ready to plug into my full-time deployment? There was also a lot of talks of GitOps. Argo Flux is up here because, again, there was a project called Argo and a project called Flux that have come together to do GitOps. We have another talk related to that coming up. So this was another thing that many people were talking about. The concept of GitOps is something people were talking about at the conference. Okay, there was also a bunch of tools that were discussed at the conference. So there were many developer tools that people were talking about. So one of them was Scaffold from Google has gone general availability. Scaffold is for running a dev environment where you make changes to your code and it automatically packages up and deploys and then runs on a Kubernetes cluster, either locally or maybe even like a dev cluster hosted out somewhere, so that you can get a more production-like environment for your tests without having to go through the whole build, push, redeploy thing. It automates a lot of that. Draft from the Azure team is similar, but has less buy-in as far as I can tell. Tilt is also another one of these things that has like a prettier UI and some interesting features there. If you look, there's a presentation comparing Tilt and Scaffold and Draft and their various features if that's something you're interested in, but many people were talking about that. Where am I? Scaffold. So telepresence is also similar to that, but it's a little bit more lightweight. Squash is kind of a neat feature. It's a debugging tool, like an online debugging tool that has integration into your editor. So for example, if you go to Squash's webpage or whatever, they have a demo of like being in VS Code and setting a breakpoint and then picking a container and then like clicking on production, and when production hits that breakpoint, it will execute or it'll like stop in your debugger, which is kind of a neat feature. It's a little scary, but there's also ephemeral containers, which are potentially a big help. Those are coming in Kubernetes 1.17 as alpha, if I'm not mistaken. So ephemeral containers basically allow you to attach new containers temporarily to a running pod, so that if you have an image in production that doesn't have a lot of debugging tools associated with it because you don't need them and it could potentially be a privilege escalation problem, you can run in with an ephemeral container, plug a container that has all of the debugging tools that you want into the side of your running container, and then start debugging against your live production container that way, which can be super handy for when things are on fire. Kubecontrol's gotten a lot of love, so they have a plugin manager because there's so many Kubecontrol plugins now that they've built a plugin manager, or someone has. Crew is a popular one. There's kubectx and kubeNS for easily switching between contexts and namespaces. It has autocomplete and fuzzy finding and stuff. Customize for rendering templates so that you can have a particular manifest and just push different configurations to Kubernetes. Kale, which is tail for Kubernetes that aggregates all of your logs from a namespace. So these are all, yeah. And then also Kubernetes distributions got a lot of, people are really excited about it. Basically it's running Kubernetes in Docker so that you can mimic a multi-master, like unlike Minikube, which is also on here, that one. So Minikube, which is Kubernetes API, but it's running all on one machine that's also the master and the node and all those things. Instead, spins up multiple nodes all in one Docker, so that you get this like high availability master worker nodes infrastructure, but it's all on your laptop or on like a small machine. So it gives you a more production-like environment, basically. But MK3S, which again, fewer resources to run in more places. And then Minikube still works, Docker for Mac and Windows still works, so Yeah, so a lot of developers getting their tools in place. Oh man. Okay, so the Kubecon had also a number of pre-conferences. So there was the Rejects, which had a much smaller audience. Apparently it was easier to get out to know everyone there because it was like 2 tracks with like 100 people per room, and so it was easier to kind of build community. And apparently the talks were actually pretty good. Day 0, there was a number of mini conferences, these associated side conferences that were very specific to a particular technology, like Spinnaker Summit, the Contributor Summit, the Service Mesh one, AWS, etc. So people could go and have like a full event before the main conference that was just about the thing they're hyper-focused on. And then Kubecon itself was 3 days of keynotes, and lightning talks, and tech talks, and special interest group introductions, and deep dives into what those interest groups are interested in, vendors, parties, etc. But not everyone can or is interested in going to Kubecon, so they've also announced these Kubernetes community days, which they're expecting to be more like a tour of a number of small conferences all across wherever people are interested. There will very probably be a Toronto one. Archie's still working on that, or he's connected to people who are. So again, if you're interested in this, or even hosting it, that would be great. Feel free to join that Slack community I mentioned earlier, because I imagine we'll get it announced in there. Yeah.
Can you put up the link to the Slack community at the end as well?
Yeah, I could put up the Slack. Do you want me to do that right now or at the end?
At the end.
At the end, great. Yeah, I'll throw that up there at the end while we're between talks. So then the Contributor Summit, there's a lot of slides. So this one was specifically geared towards the people who work on Kubernetes, the developers or documentation people, but probably most developers that work on Kubernetes. So this one was a very focused event for like where is the future of Kubernetes going. Obviously it's a much smaller group. Apparently it was actually pretty great. Apparently the special interest group meet and greets were pretty useful. There were sessions on how to make your first pull request, courses on that kind of thing. So yeah, a lot of good
Are
stuff.
all these people from Google?
No. I imagine a number of them are, but definitely Kubernetes still has a lot of prominent people from Google, but definitely there's a community that is not just from Google. I know Red Hat has some people, and then I don't believe most of these people are from Google. Just probably I have no data there. Yeah.
Do you personally have a recommendation for how to get Kubernetes and Docker to work well together?
Do I personally have a recommendation on how to get Kubernetes and Docker working well together? I'll answer that afterwards. I don't know exactly what you mean. Okay, and then Kubecon had a number of, had 2 Canadian speakers, and obviously Archie would like there to be more in the future. So Chris Carty from Ottawa gave a talk at Kubecon, as well as this person whose name I can't see on the slide, but they're also in the Kubernetes channel, or Slack group, so they gave some talks, and more people should give talks. Okay, so here's the upcoming KubeCons, if any of that piqued your interest. In March, at the end of March, there's the Europe KubeCon in Amsterdam. In the end of July, there's a China KubeCon in Shanghai. And in the next North American one will be the end of November in Boston. I've heard, again, from Archie, so who knows, I've heard that because Boston is relatively close to Southern Ontario, they're considering getting a bus together and driving down. I don't know. So keep your eyes peeled for that, I suppose. Okay, next little bit is updates to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation and its projects. So there's a number of things. The Cloud Native Computing Foundation, normally there's a slide that is super daunting and it just shows a bunch of things in a bunch of different categories. This year I think it's too large. But the Cloud Native Computing Foundation has a number of tiers that they put their projects into, depending on maturity. So this year, this quarter, these projects were added to the sandbox, which is the entry phase. So there's OpenTelemetry, which I've already mentioned, OpenEBS, which is a storage device, if you don't want to use like GCS or something like that. Thanos, which provides long-term storage and high availability to Prometheus clusters. Flux, which does GitOps. Intoto, which is security, I don't know anything about that one. StreamZ, which is a Kafka operator. KubeVirt, which is for running virtual machines on Kubernetes, which seems like an inside-out kind of concept, but apparently it's in the sandbox. And then Longhorn, which is also a storage thing. That one's from Rancher. So these ones are just in the door and have recently been entered into the sandbox phase. The incubation, things have moved up. KW, which is a key value, distributed key value store, it has moved into the incubation phase. And Cloud Events, which is a useful attachment for all the serverless stuff if you want to, because it provides events for your serverless stuff to run on. Yeah?
So what are the criteria here for promotion? I guess the main player like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google,
Yeah.
and IBM, I guess, are part of the like founders of
Yep.
the native foundation. So here, what are the criteria when you promote things from some?
I don't remember off the top of my head. You'd have to look. I know that there are criteria and things move through them, but I don't recall exactly the criteria. Do you know? No? Okay. Okay. Yeah, okay. And then a number of things have graduated out of the incubator phase. So Jaeger, which is a tracing set of components and front end. This one has graduated. It's stable enough that many people are using it in production. I think this one came through Uber. But yeah, so for distributed tracing, this is now a graduated one. There's also Vitesse, which is graduated. Our team is actually a little dubious about this one, but because maybe this is one of the criteria. He had mentioned that Vitesse is still mostly contributed to by the company that runs it, and he seemed like that was different than the criteria, so he was a little surprised that they graduated already. But they're in use by a number of companies, and so I suppose there's a certain amount of production stability in that these companies are using it in production. Okay, Helm 3. So, Helm, in case you didn't know, is a kind of, I don't want to call it a package manager, but it's basically people can make Helm charts, which are a packaged set of Kubernetes objects and templates, and then publish them. And so you can, if you want a particular feature, you can pull in a Helm chart that will kind of set up everything that you need, probably. So Helm 2 has been out for a while, and they've been talking about Helm 3 for a while, and this time it's actually been released. One of the major changes is that there is no longer a tiller, which was part of the Helm infrastructure or architecture from before that they got rid of in this most recent version. But there's a couple more changes as well. So the one of them is that Helm init has been removed. Basically, you can plug Helm into, I believe, you can plug Helm into an existing cluster without having to first turn that cluster into a Helm cluster. The chart repository has changed. It used to be a GitHub repo with a bunch of folders, but now it's a little bit more decentralized and also centralized at the same time. There's a Helm hub that has all of the packages on it, but the packages themselves come from different kind of sponsor Kubernetes accounts, which should help with maintenance and stop things from becoming stale. There you go, that one. They also have a better kind of release upgrade strategy. When you're upgrading a particular Helm chart these days, it used to just compare the old template to the new template, whereas now it compares the old template, the new template, and the current running state. So if you've made changes, it will try to merge them. And also, they passed a security audit, which is good for people. And there's a relatively there's a couple different migration patterns if you're interested in that kind of thing that try to keep it. Apparently, they mostly work most of the time. There's a couple of other things. By and large, Helm 2 charts will still work at Helm 3. Helm 2 and Helm 3 should be mostly infrastructure architectural changes, and there are options on migrating clusters from Helm 2 to Helm 3. You should go look them up. And yeah, so in Kubernetes land, there were a couple of different releases this year, 3 so far. There was 1.14 named Kubernetes, I didn't know they had names. 115 called the Persevering release, and 116 called Unlimited Breadsticks for All, that were released in March, June, and September. And Kubernetes 117 is coming out approximately any day now on December 9th. It has not had a theme announced yet, but okay, so then there's a couple of Kubernetes 116 is the current stable. So these are the features of Kubernetes 116, which has been released since the last quarter. There was a number of enhancements, 8 stable enhancements, 8 that graduated to beta, and then 15 new alpha features. And then this is just kind of an overview of some of them. So CRDs, which is custom resource definitions, which is important for this automation framework, and admission webhooks, which are related to that, but I'm not going to talk about them, have reached general availability, which is kind of big news. It kind of makes it clear that these things are stable features that you can rely on going forwards. Volume cloning and resizing has moved into beta, so this can do a little bit of online, but also offline resizing of volumes. Runtime class, which I talked about earlier, has reached beta. QBDM for Windows has gotten better and moved into alpha. And IPv4, IPv6 dual stack support reached alpha, which is important for some customers. And ephemeral containers, which I already talked about, became alpha. That's what you can attach to a running pod. And there's an endpoint slice API, which reached alpha. Basically, the only people who care about that are people with really large deployments. There was essentially a performance limitation in previous services where if the number of endpoints got too large, then just listing that data and storing it in the master was a problem. And querying it and editing it had a lot more overhead, and so you could only scale your services so large before you had to work outside of Kubernetes. Whereas with the endpoint slice API, it becomes almost unbound. Well, okay, that's a ridiculous statement. The numbers get a lot larger before you start running into service limitations. Kubernetes 117 is on track for December 9 release. The release notes are there. Basically, the kind of major features that people are excited about for this one is there's a feature for sidecar deployment that has fixed the sequencing between different containers, so you can have something like this, or Envoy, I should say, come up before and become ready before your main container gets launched, so you don't have to deal with the race condition in your workload that you currently have to. So people are excited about that one. Windows enhancements, running Kubernetes on Windows and with Windows continues to get better. Yeah. There's also a number of slides here about Istio. I'm going to kind of rush through these to kind of pick it up. So microservices, they're cool. They have a number of advantages. They allow you to scale different parts of your app individually. You can separate your concerns. You can commit and deploy faster because your code is individually lighter and smaller. You can use different programming languages, and you can have more discrete code bases, which can be better. But there are also challenges. It introduces complexity. There's more owners that you have to track down. More programming languages is a pro and a con. And it's also, there can be more network interactions and hops. And I don't know what this slide is about. Kubernetes, you all know what Kubernetes is, I assume. It keeps your applications alive and it's a declarative thing, and you can add more nodes as you scale. Yeah, so then there's a number of connections between services, and so you can make it hard to detect certain network conditions. There's security policies and the identity of one service talking to another. Resiliency and upgrading a service, and these are all concerns that this kind of model brings around. Services meshes are brought in to make it so you can more easily trace which services are talking to which, and also gives you a certain amount of introspection around what kinds of things they're all saying to each other. So that the developers can basically say, I would like to talk to the shipping service, wherever that is, please just go put it over there. And I don't have to worry about auth or navigating or any of that kind of stuff. And then the operators of the service mesh can focus on the mesh part. Istio is a service mesh. There are a number of them. Istio is one of them. You can run it on top of Kubernetes or virtual machines based on Envoy, which is the part that actually does all the work. It originally came out with Google and IBM, and there's at this point many organizations that are all kind of working on it. It's not just a Google project at this point. Yeah, so it's it's pretty popular in the service mesh industry. Basically, it makes it so that you can easily get data telemetry from all of your services talking to each other. You don't have to put that code into your app. That's just part of the network fabric, including logging for traffic if you want it. It gives you distributed tracing because you can carry a follow request between services. It can give you a service graph, like the picture I have back here, where you can see like which services talk to each other without having to, read docs. It also gives you traffic management, so you can do like A/B routing between different deploys. You can do canary deploys. You can do load balancing from the client side. Timeouts, retries, and circuit breakers are all built in, so you don't have to build that into your app, all that kind of stuff. And then also encryption and authentication. The services can receive mutual TLS between themselves so that they know who's talking to them and they can trust what's going on. Authorization level, egress, etc. So Istio used to look like this, where every app has an envoy that talks to Mixer, which has a control plane API that does all the telemetry and stuff. There are other ones. Yeah. But in 2019, they made a number of changes. So they got rid of Mixer because it was a single point of failure and caused some congestion. So they now have telemetry as an extension that gets built into the Envoy sidecars themselves. So you don't need a mixer to do that telemetry. It gets sent from each pod, which scales better. It sends directly into Prometheus or Stackdriver or others. So this is the new thing. They have less, you don't need to configure as much. Mutual TLS between services, like both client and server certificates, is now mostly automated. They can do protocol sniffing to figure out what kind of things you're saying, transparent proxying, all that kind of stuff. And Istio Control also has gotten leveled up with a bunch of features to audit and diagnose problems so that it can look at your service and be like, it's kind of, I've noticed this weird thing over here, do you want me to fix that for you, as far as I can. And also a bunch of things have gotten simpler, like the cluster role, RBAC, and the service role binding have all got turned into one authorization policy. Mixer is gone, so all that's kind of gone. There's now a root namespace for policies. You can now deploy them with an operator for most of your common topologies, and then as that goes on, they're going to add more for more complicated multi-cluster deploys and that kind of thing. So that makes it easier to run these things. It's easier to install and update Istio itself, and you can also attach to virtual machines and those kinds of things, so you can kind of bring services in. So the point of these things, I believe, that Archie wanted to stress is that if you tried Istio 1.0 a while ago and it wasn't exactly what you were looking for, maybe try it again. Maybe the things that you hated have gotten better. Okay, so these are the speakers for tonight. They're actually in the opposite order. So we have Olga here, who's going to give the first talk as mentioned, and Andy, who's going to give the second one, as mentioned. I don't really know how this slide is supposed to work. If anyone has feedback on the event, feel free to scan that QR code right now, and it'll take you to a Google Sheet where Archie has put together a number of questions asking about how you liked the event and what we could do better next time, those kinds of things. Yes?
Quick question about Istio.
Yeah, okay. I may not know.
I didn't see if Google, Amazon, or Microsoft are part of the Istio effort.
Google and IBM, I believe, started it. And so in that sense, I believe Google's involved. But there's a number of companies at this point that are contributors. I would be surprised if no one from Amazon or Microsoft had ever contributed to the patch, but I don't have data on it. You'd have to look, but I believe so. It's like I had said in the slide, it's no longer just one company's project. It's a proper community project at this point. So there are a number of companies. I would be surprised if they weren't among them.
I was wondering maybe they're not participating is a result of the fact that they have in their stack something that is covering the feature of Istio.
It's very possible, that they're deploying or working on their own service meshes and would not want to be part of Istio, that's very possible, but I do not know.
So Istio is part of the community cloud native
Yes,
foundation
yeah, I believe,
efforts?
if I'm not mistaken, really? Oh, interesting. Okay, apparently no. Envoy is though. Envoy I think is in CNCF, but I guess. Interesting. Okay, so in case you didn't hear, Istio apparently is not a CNCF project and is still, Google has some manner of control over that, and Knative is built on Istio and so therefore is also not in that, in CNCF. But Envoy, which is the transparent proxy that Istio drives, is CNCF, so it's complicated. Yeah? Yeah?
Link for the stack.
Sorry?
Link for the Slack.
Link for the Slack. Yeah, oh yeah, I'm getting it. So if you have feedback, this is this QR code. Feel free to scan this now. Maybe I'll throw it up at the end of the event as well, because at this point you haven't seen the event yet. The slides will be hosted here. We'll also throw that up at the end if people want it. And that's the last slide, so I'll go back to the Slack, which was way at the front. And then other than that, I'm done talking. You're allowed to clap at that. Woohoo! Where the heck is it? That one. So this is the slide. Feel free to join it, please. Okay, so other than that, I believe you're going to come up next. But if people want maybe like a 5-minute break while you set up, I haven't checked over here since I've been talking. There's probably more food and there's definitely more drinks.